Hello, hello. Hello, hello. I'm going to give it just a few minutes, give some folks a chance to join us. Oops, there we go. Good evening. Just giving it a few minutes to give some folks a chance to join us. Good evening. I'm also going to put a couple of links in the chat. The first link is if you want to submit a question that you'd like for me to answer anonymously this evening. This link is for you to do that. And then I'll also mention the book club that I'm hosting on Fable, the Fable app, for at least the month of May. We'll see how it goes if I continue beyond that. But there is a link in the chat to join the book club on the Fable app as well. You're also welcome to comment questions if you feel comfortable doing that. That first link is just if you want to submit questions anonymously. But good evening. We'll get started just because I want to be mindful of folks' time. For folks who are joining in real time, if you are not able to join in real time, or if you want to be able to go back and watch or review the questions that I answer, you will be able to do that as well. This will be published as an episode of From the Heart Side Out, and so it will be officially released on Wednesday. So thank you. Welcome to From the Heart Side Out. This is one of our heart to heart episodes where you have an opportunity to ask me anything. I'm here to answer questions that you have this month in honor of April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month. The questions or our conversation this evening will center around sexual assault or abuse, different forms of sexual violence, questions related to those sorts of topics. So again, you are welcome to drop your questions in the chat if you would like to, or you can use that link, that first link that I put in the chat, to submit a question anonymously, and I'll be able to access that during our conversation as well. Because I don't see any questions in the chat just yet, I'll go ahead and start with some questions that I received in advance or found in advance. So, our first question: is it okay if I don't want to report my assault? Again, these questions are going to be about sexual assault or sexual violence. So, by all means, please make sure you take care of yourself. This can be a really difficult topic, a really sensitive topic for a lot of folks. And so, it's okay if you're not able to stay the whole time, or if you just want to wait until the episode is released because you don't know if you're going to be able to or open to discussing these things or listening to some of these topics in real time, that is totally fine. So, again, first question, is it okay if I don't want to report my assault? So it says, I feel like I'm letting people down by not doing so, but I really don't want to report it. I'm worried that maybe it was all a misunderstanding and he didn't know that I didn't want to continue, but at the same time, I wasn't given much of a choice. I feel like I didn't try hard enough to stop it, so it doesn't really count as assault. I don't want to report something that doesn't need to be reported. I'm also worried that I wouldn't be taken seriously because I was getting paid, and I think that I would be mortified if anything came of a report. It's been 5.5 months since this happened, and I have no proof anyway. Mainly, though, I don't want to report it because I don't want to relive the experience in front of others and then have it become something big. If it became a big situation, my family would eventually find out and probably my community at some point too. And I don't want them to know. But I also feel like if I don't report it, I'm being selfish. I'm worried that by not reporting, I could be letting others experience the same thing. But the man who did this doesn't seem malicious. I agreed to it ahead of time and I seemed eager. So I don't know. I feel like I'm making a big deal out of everything. I first want to say that if you have experienced any type of sexual abuse or assault, any type of sexual violence, it is 1000% your choice to decide if you want to report that, if you want to make a formal report to the police or any sort of investigative agencies. It is your choice. You are not obligated to report. You are not a terrible, awful person. If you don't want to report, it doesn't mean that you think what happened is okay. It doesn't mean that you don't care if this happens to other people. It doesn't mean anything like that. It means that you have decided that what is best for you and your sanity and your well-being is to not file a report. If we're honest, we know that folks who do make reports of sexual violence or sexual assault aren't always treated the best. We know that we live in a society that does a lot of victim blaming and victim shaming and trying to convince you that for some reason this is your fault. You let this happen. You should have been able to prevent it. What if no one believes you? There's all these questions and worries and fears that you might be experiencing, and so it makes sense that you're not thrilled about the idea of reporting this, and especially when there's no guarantee or you can't be sure what will come of it, if anything will come of a report. And even if you were, supposed to be paid for sexual services, if that was the agreement that was made, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to have been sexually assaulted. It doesn't mean that it's not possible that someone violated, your rights or your boundaries. And you still are not obligated to report any type of assault that you have experienced. So, no, yes, it is totally okay if you don't want to report your assault because you're not required to do so. You're not under any obligation to do so. And a lot of survivors don't want to report and they have their reasons and they're entitled to those reasons. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. Other people don't have to agree with it. You got to do what's best for you and what makes the most sense for you, even if it's not something that makes the most sense for other folks. If you're watching or listening and you have thoughts or ideas about this person's question, is it okay if they don't want to report? Feel free to share those in the comments as well. Or if you have questions yourself that you'd like addressed, you can either share them in the comments or you can use that link in the chat to submit anonymous questions, and I have access to those as well. For now, I'll keep going and read another question. So the subject of this next question is coerced or pressured sex the same as rape? Says, I told a story recently on Reddit about how my abusive ex would often coerce me to have sex, and someone mentioned that that means I was raped repeatedly. I hadn't thought of it as rape, and I did give consent, technically. By the end of the relationship, I would just lie there and let him do whatever he wanted and hate him a little more each day. He liked to use sex and withholding it as a way to exert power over me. In the beginning, I used to be a reasonably liberated woman who loved sex. What happened over the years was he withheld it and used it in such a manner to make me completely unhappy and unsatisfied. I think both are considered sexual assault, obviously. Both have the element of not quite consenting and violent, but at different levels. In my case, it was more of a psychological type of thing, not physical. Is this a discussion that people are having in gender studies and stuff like that? Is there a general consensus? What do you think? So, back to the original question of, is coerced or pressured sex the same as rape or the same as sexual assault? The short answer, yes. There is not all sexual assaults are particularly violent or aggressive. If it's coercion, it's not consent. If it's pressure, it's not consent. If your yes is not given freely and with full agency to revoke that yes at any time, then it is not a true yes. It is not true consent if you had to be persuaded into it or talked into it, or if you just give up and give in to the pressure that is being applied to you. If it is not an affirmative yes, if it is not a clear and confident yes, it's not a yes. It's either yes or it's no. When it comes to sex or it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to consent, it is or it isn't. And so if you were not able or willing to give an enthusiastic and affirmative yes, then you didn't give a yes. Sometimes people will try to justify, well, I didn't force you, I didn't use any violence, or I didn't, use any type of physical aggression. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been some level of pressure applied. It doesn't mean that someone hasn't been coerced into having sex. And so when we're talking about consent, it needs to be freely given. It needs to be reversible. It needs to be fully informed. We're looking for it to be enthusiastic or affirmative, that, it is a yes, not a I guess, not a maybe, not a fine. If you're going to keep asking me or begging me, those sorts of things do not constitute consent. So if you were coerced, if you were feeling pressured, if it didn't feel safe or like a real viable option for you to say no, then it was it was not consensual. And that can be a really tough, realization for a lot of folks to have or to come to, that they may have been sexually assaulted, especially if it doesn't fit the narrative of the super violent, aggressive, obvious sort of assault or situation. Being asked repeatedly or being pressured, guilt tripped into sex doesn't always register with people as something being non-consensual. But people don't have to guilt trip you or emotionally manipulate you into doing things that you actually want to do. And so that's a pretty good sign or a pretty good indicator there. All right, I'm double checking the chat just to see if there have been any questions dropped in there. Again, you can use that link to submit questions anonymously, or you can comment your questions, or if you have thoughts about the questions that we're discussing, and you are okay doing that openly or without being anonymous, you are welcome to just drop those in the chat as well. There's also a link to the chat to the Healing Pages book club. You can find the book club on the Fable app. I love the Fable app. It's free and you can read directly on the app. If you're someone who likes to read ebooks, you can purchase books through the Fable library on their website. You can't purchase books through the app, but you can through their website. If you join the book club or if you join Fable, using my invite code, we both get a $5 credit to go towards ebooks. I am piloting Healing Pages Book Club in the month of May to see if I'm going to stick around with it, see how folks like it or feel about it. So if you're interested in reading books about mental health, relationships, sex or sexuality, join us on the Fable app for at least the month of May. We'll keep it going depending on the response, depending on how it goes, we'll keep it going. So again, the link to submit questions anonymously, as well as the link to join the book club, are in the chat. And I will go on to our next question. Now, this is one that a lot of people struggle with. I see conversations about this online. I've had conversations about this in the work that I do with folks directly. It's a big one for a lot of people. The question is, does it count as sexual assault if I had an orgasm? A lot of people wonder this or struggle with this or feel like, well, this couldn't have been rape. It couldn't have been sexual assault if my body responded in this way. Because if it really wasn't consensual, or if I really didn't want this, surely my body would have shut down and stopped this from happening or stopped this from being an option. And I'm here to tell you that even if your body responded in a particular way, even if you experienced arousal, even if you had an orgasm, you could have still been sexually assaulted. Orgasms are possible during sexual assault. And that is because it's just how our bodies are wired. It's our bodies doing what they're designed to do. Our bodies respond to being stimulated. They respond to external stimulus regardless of what that stimulus might be. It doesn't need our permission. Our body doesn't need our permission to respond to those things. So it can respond to sex, it can respond to sexual assault, it can respond to joy, to pain, to any of those things without our permission, without necessarily checking in with our mind, even to see what else is going on. What's the whole context of this situation? And so, even during something like a sexual assault, your body could possibly respond, and that response might be having an orgasm. It doesn't mean that you're experiencing pleasure. It doesn't mean that you're secretly enjoying this or you secretly wanted this. It's just an example of a physical response that occurs, whether our brain or our mind is on board with that or not. It's just like breathing, it's just like sweating, it's just like when we feel like a rush of adrenaline. You can't prevent your body from initiating the process of sweating when it's receiving the signals that it's time to sweat or that it needs to sweat. And so sexual arousal and orgasms can be the same way, that if your body is stimulated in a certain way, your body is not saying, hey, did we get consent for this, or are we enjoying this? It's just responding the way that it responds. And there have been some studies or some consideration given to the fact that part of how your body responds might be its attempt to try to keep you safe or protect you from some sort of injury or experiencing further pain. So, for example, like vaginas lubricating during a sexual assault could be to prevent tearing or other injuries that could be caused by forceful friction or things of that sort. So it could be your body trying to protect you or trying to respond in what it believes is an appropriate manner, even if that response does not fully fit within the context of what you're experiencing, such as a sexual assault. So, having an orgasm or experiencing any form of sexual arousal does not negate being sexually assaulted. It doesn't mean that this doesn't count or this wasn't a real assault because your body responded in this way. That can, again, be a really difficult thing for some people to grasp and to give themselves grace and compassion and understanding that if this was a non consensual experience for you, it was a non consensual experience for you, period. Period. Regardless of how your body responded, your body is doing what it thinks it's supposed to be doing in that moment or at that time. Sometimes our bodies get it wrong. That's all that means. All right. There is another question, kind of similar or related to another question that we just talked about. It's also related to the concept of being coerced or pressured into having sex and what might come after that, or possibilities that could come after that. So this person says, I've had consensual sex with someone that has previously coerced me into sex. So I had an ex who coerced me to have sex with him after we had broken up. I wasn't ready, but we ended up having sex after meeting up to hang out, naively thinking we could be friends. It was an immature thought. I was very confused about whether he had coerced me or if I had subconsciously wanted it. After that incident, I confronted him about it and we stopped contact for a while. After 2 to 3 months, we met again and started a sexual relationship, and I believe we had consensual sex during this period. This was a few years ago, but I'm still confused about the incident that occurred where I felt he violated me, but I still agreed to have consensual sex with that same person after that. Has anyone else experienced this, and what are your thoughts? So, having consensual sex with someone who has previously coerced you or pressured you into sex is absolutely a thing. It's absolutely a thing because when we're talking about consent or sex being consensual, one of the things we're looking for in determining true consent is that the consent is specific. So it's specific to this instance, this experience, this action. And so someone consenting to sex on Monday does not mean they have automatically consented to sex on Tuesday. It doesn't mean that they consented to what happened 6 months ago or 4 years ago or what might happen 3 years from now. That consent is valid in that moment. It's not blanket consent. And so it is absolutely possible that someone you could have had consensual sex with in the past, coerced you into sex, coerced you into a non consensual sexual activity at this particular point in time. And in the future, it is possible that sex between you and this person could absolutely be 100% consensual. I wonder if part of the internal struggle you're having or the questioning or wondering is I noticed some of the things you said was I was confused about whether or not I was coerced or if I had subconsciously wanted this. I wonder if it's that confusion. Did I want this? Did I bring this on? Did I invite this in some way? Did my body language suggest this? Maybe I wasn't really clear about what I wanted or how I was feeling. These are things that a lot of survivors do to try to make sense of their experiences. Maybe it really wasn't that bad. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe it was an accident. All of those things that you're trying to make sense of your experience. You're trying to find some way to explain what happened, why it happened, how it happened, trying to understand, did I play a part in this? What did I do to bring this on? And the reality is, if you are having sex with someone, if the intention is for that sex to be consensual, then this conversation would need to be mutual. If there was any uncertainty on their end, that is an opportunity to clarify that, to say, "Hey, I know you said you're okay with this, but the way you said it, I'm not really sure. Can we talk about this? Are you sure that you're okay with this? Is there something you would rather do instead?" Those sorts of things. And it seems like that understanding was not there, or that conversation was not there. And maybe there's some, I don't know, the quite the emotions. Maybe there's some guilt or some judgment of yourself for having consensual sex with someone who had previously coerced you. Just like it's absolutely your choice if you want to report if you've been sexually assaulted. If you say, "Hey, these lines have been crossed in the past with this person, maybe we can have a conversation about it. Maybe they can acknowledge their wrongdoing. I'm not entirely sure that I want to end this connection or relationship with them." That is also a choice that you get to make. It's easy to assume that if you've experienced any type of sexual assault or non-consensual sexual contact, that you would immediately want absolutely nothing to do with this person. And for a lot of people, that is the case. It does happen that way, but not for everyone. You know, there's no reason to need to look back and feel ashamed or to judge yourself for continuing or restarting a sexual relationship with them. It sounds like there was a lot of confusion and uncertainty about the dynamic that you were wanting versus what was being offered to you. And so I just encourage you to have some grace and some compassion for yourself. You were not the first person to be in a situation like this, and people find themselves in situations like this for a variety of reasons. So, yes, I encourage you again to have some grace, have some compassion for yourself, and to not feel pressure to make assumptions about what this means about you or what this says about you, because in reality, it may say nothing at all about you besides, this is where I was at that point in my life. This is the choice that I made, and that is that. Yeah. I'm keeping an eye on the chat for additional questions, keeping an eye on that anonymous form. I haven't seen any additional ones coming in just yet. I'll give it a couple more minutes to see if we have any other questions or other things that folks want to definitely make sure that we address, or thoughts about the questions that we've discussed so far. If not, we might start to wrap up this evening. Again, if you were not able to catch the entire conversation live, that is okay. Uh, I'm not exactly sure what will happen to this live video as soon as I'm done. I think it goes ahead and stays on my page. If not, that's okay, because this will be released as an official episode of From the Heart Side Out on Wednesday, which you can watch right here on YouTube. You can also listen on pretty much any platform that you're probably listening to your podcast: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Um, there's several others. I can never remember them all. Those are the main ones that I remember. And again, please, please, please check out the Healing Pages Book Club hosted in the Fable app. There's a link in the chat to join the book club. If you use my invite code to join Fable or to join the book club, we both receive a $5 credit that can go towards purchasing ebooks through Fable. The app itself is free. And what I really like about it for book clubs is that there's options to discuss the book as we're reading it, but you also don't have to read spoilers. Like, we can discuss it chapter by chapter or section by section, which I think is really cool and really helpful for folks who tend to read ahead in book clubs, but or don't want to spoil the book for others or have the book spoiled for themselves. Um, Please connect with me on Instagram at See the Sex Lady, Facebook at See the Sex Lady, YouTube, you're already here, See the Sex Lady. If you have additional questions after watching or listening to this episode, and you didn't get a chance to ask your question in real time, you can also email me at podcast@seethesexlady.com. And I would love to hear from you, love to answer your questions. I'm double checking one more time. I don't see anything else coming in, so I think we're going to get ready to wrap up. Again, connect with me on Instagram, Facebook at See the Sex Lady. I would love to hear from you, love to know your thoughts about any of the questions that we have discussed tonight. And yeah, stay tuned for more content, more episodes, more conversations on From the Heart Side Out.